CS5's new Mixer Brush feature opens up a whole new range of painting options. In this lesson, I'll show you how to give a photographic image the painterly touch. Let's get started in our Chapter 7 folder by opening the file titled Mixer Brush. I'm going to press F to cycle into full screen mode, and I'm going to drag this image over here out of the way. Maybe increase the size, and again, let's drag it back over here. Now the first thing we need to do is select the Mixer Brush. It's located directly under the brush tools in the Tools panel. So we simply click here, and right down at the bottom we have Mixer Brush. The shortcut again is B. Now a couple of things we need to talk about before we get into the Mixer Brush. There are a lot of new options here in the options bar. This very first color swatch here is what's called our reservoir color. This is the color into which we'll be dipping our brush. Next to the reservoir, we have two icons that we can toggle off and on. This first one is our load brush icon, and when we toggle it on, Photoshop will dip our brush into the reservoir between each and every stroke. To the right of that, we have our clean brush option, and this will clean the brush in between every stroke. So with both of these options turned on, each brush stroke will begin with identical amounts of reservoir color. We have a pull-down menu here that gives us a ton of handy presets, everything going from dry options, moist to wet, and even very wet. And we're going to take a look at what these individual settings do, because this is the key to how the Mixer Brush works. The Mixer Brush, for the first time in Photoshop, allows us to simulate what happens when painters paint onto a wet canvas. You dip a brush into a color and you paint on a canvas, and if the canvas is wet, the brush color and the canvas color will mix together nicely, and that's what we're simulating here with the Mixer Brush. Now our wet value determines the wetness of the canvas. If we set a high amount in the wet value, that means we have a very wet canvas. The paint on that canvas is wet. So when we paint on a wet canvas, we can obviously mix and blend and smudge colors together to a higher degree. If we set wetness all the way down to 0%, we're painting on a dry canvas. The load option here determines how much of the reservoir color we pick up with the brush. When we set a high load percentage, we're picking up a lot of color each time the brush is dipped into the reservoir. A low value would do the opposite and leave us with very little reservoir color on our brush tip. Now, if these two controls weren't enough for you, we have a mix option. And what the mix option does is let you fine-tune amounts between the reservoir color and the canvas color. When a mix is down at a very low value, the reservoir color takes precedence. So if we have a mix of 1 or 2 or 3%, the reservoir color is going to dominate the color that's existing already on the canvas. If your mix is set to a very high value, that canvas color is going to dominate over the reservoir color. Now you can use the Mixer Brush with any brush shape. I'm going to choose here this round fan brush shape, and I'll point out in the last lesson we made a lot of changes to brush dynamics. So I want you to go here to the flyout menu and choose Clear Brush Controls. That's going to set all of the brush dynamics back to their defaults, so we can be starting with the same values. Now with this round fan brush, the only thing I'm going to really change here is the length. The default is 25%, and I really want you to get a good look at the effect we're going to paint, so I'm going to boost that up just a bit to about 39%. Now let's collapse this brush panel here so we can free up more room, and we'll move it out of the way. We've got our brush selected. I'm going to increase the size a bit. That's a little small for what we're about to do. So what I'm going to do is go up here and set a brush size of somewhere around 40, 45. Should be pretty good. Now here's what we're going to do in this example. We are going to paint over this flamingo with our Mixer Brush set in such a way that we can have a nice blending of color, so it looks like we actually are painting on a wet canvas. Now before we do any painting, it's always a good idea to have a layer above your background layer. We want to keep this background layer pristine and untouched, so let's create a brand new transparent layer above our background. The shortcut for that is Shift-Command-N on a Mac, Control-Shift-N on Windows. That brings up our new layer dialog box. We can leave the default name for this example and hit OK. Now what we need to do is decide on a reservoir color. We don't want to paint with green on this orange flamingo. We want to go for something that's a little more believable than that. What we want to do actually is sample a color from this flamingo and use that as our reservoir color. And I'll show you how to do that. To sample a color from the flamingo, remember the flamingo's on our background layer. We have to select our background layer. And a quick way to make a selection of a color that's on an image is to simply position the mouse over the color that you wish to sample, and we're going to hold down the Option key on a Mac, Alt key on Windows, and that is going to load our reservoir color automatically. Now I'll point out here there's a pull down menu associated with this reservoir color. I want you to verify that you have a check mark next to Load Solid Colors Only. That's very important. If this is unchecked, when we did the Option Alt click on the flamingo, you would have, instead of a solid color patch here, you would actually have a pattern of their fur. So we want to be painting with a solid color, so just make sure that that's selected. And the very final step we need to do, actually two more steps, is we need to reselect our layer 1 because we don't want to paint on the background layer. And because we are painting on a transparent layer, we need to turn this Sample All Layers option on so that our colors will mix from the reservoir with the brush all the way through down to the background layer. Now we are finally ready to start painting. I'm going to use a drawing tablet. You can just as easily accomplish this with the mouse. And what I'm simply going to do is come over here along the edge of the flamingo and simply start brushing. I'm painting with an orange sampled from the flamingo, and we're simply mixing these colors together, and I'm just loosely following the shape of these feathers here, following the plumage. We'll come down here, and this is going to be very quick, but I just want to give you an idea of how you can use this mixer brush tool to create an artistic effect here. There we go. I'm not going to be too fine with this, but just as a rough example. Now, one thing I will do here before I paint on the neck is I'll increase the wetness here. So instead of our default of 50, let's go up, high to something about 68, 69%, and let's see what that will do as we paint here. Here again, I'm just following the curve around. So you can see now with a wetter canvas, we're getting much more of a blurring, smudging of colors here. Just touch up this part and come right over here. And one more brush stroke right around there. And let's zoom in at 100% so we can take a closer look. Command 1 on the Mac, Control 1 on Windows. And you can see that where we've painted with our brush strokes, we have a very nice blend between the canvas color and the reservoir color. And because we've used a natural media brush, we have very naturalistic, believable brush strokes here. This combination of natural media brushes with their many bristle tip options and the mixer brush opens up a whole new world of creative possibilities for your images. And let's do a quick before and after. Let's turn this layer off and on. There's our original image with the mixer brush. So this is the tool that you can have a lot of fun with, and if you were going to other software programs to apply sort of painterly effects to images, now you can do those right inside Photoshop.